I'm holding this funky thing that looks like some sort of Roto-Rooter toilet cleaner because this is the 2012 Honda Civic compressed natural gas, and we're going to show you how you fill this guy up. So now here under the hood of the Civic Natural Gas, we get essentially the same 1.8 liter 4-cylinder engine that the rest of the Civic lineup gets. But this engine is built from the factory for use with CNG, which means it has hardened valves and hardened valve seats. That's really about the only change that they do to make this work with compressed natural gas. The problem with that is, and because they haven't changed anything else, the power is reduced slightly from the regular Civic. The regular Civic and the Civic HF produce 140 horsepower and 128 pound-feet of torque, and this natural gas engine only produces 110 horsepower and 106 pound-feet of torque. Now here from the driver's perspective on the inside, the Civic Natural Gas looks exactly like a regular Civic. So we get this dual level starter, which is slightly funky, but it is way more normal than a Prius where you have the gauges in the center. Over here on this side we get the radio, and this is in this model, this is Honda's usual navigation radio. Now the graphics unfortunately aren't quite as nice as they are on that high resolution screen, although they are pretty good. They're definitely better than older products like the Acura RL. Fairly responsive system. It also does XM traffic, and of course you have full iPod and USB control. Now it's hard to tell in this video with the light, but the dashboard is made of fairly hard plastic. It is, however, textured fairly nicely. Now this has been one complaint that I've heard over and over and over again on the Honda Civic. And it's one that I actually don't quite understand because the Prius and the Prius C have very hard interior plastics, and for some reason I don't hear very many complaints about that. This is pretty standard in the economy category. So here in the back seat we have pretty much a standard Civic. I mean there's no loss in practicality other than the fact that the rear seat doesn't fold because of course the gas tank is right behind me in the rear seat. We have adequate headroom and adequate legroom. I'm 6 feet tall. This front seat's adjusted for me at 6 feet tall, and I still have about 3 or 4 inches of legroom left. So now the seat bottom cushion is a little bit low, probably designed for shorter drivers or kids, so that might be a little bit of a comfort issue for taller people on longer car trips. But overall there's nothing objectionable in the back seat at all. Look at that. The downside is back here because that is all the trunk you actually get. Now, to be perfectly honest, in a commuter vehicle, that's more trunk than I actually need. I only carry this roller bag with me because that's all the video equipment I normally carry around, and here's just some other random stuff in the trunk. But truthfully, I never carry anything else in my car, so that actually would be fine for me. You really couldn't take a CNG vehicle for a family vacation for 4 away for very long because there'd be nowhere to put the luggage unless you packed really light. Now, although refueling is quick, gas stations can be a little bit tricky to find because they aren't in your normal places. So if you just exit a freeway, you won't expect to find a CNG station. They will, however, seem to congregate around airports and industrial parks. That's where I've been finding most of mine. And in this local area, even the local school district operates one, as well as PG&E. Now, compared to filling an electric vehicle, which can take hours, literally I mean, with the Nissan Leaf taking about 7 hours to charge from empty, it really only takes a few minutes to fill up the CNG Civic, and we'll go over that a little bit later in the video. Now, another reason to deal with the natural gas and the trouble of finding natural gas stations is this little sticker right here. And this little sticker means that I get to drive all by myself in the carpool lane in California, and that's worth about a 30 minutes per day savings on my round trip to Burlingame. That's a definite score in my book. Now, much like an electric vehicle, you actually can fill your Civic CNG at home. You can buy a fill station, which takes your natural gas source from your household natural gas service, compresses it, and then pumps it into your Civic. Now, this of course only works if you have natural gas service at home because the CNG Civic will not run off of propane. And there's also an important thing to know about that, and that's that Honda would prefer you did not fill your Civic that way. And there's a reason for that. They claim that home natural gas services can be a little bit impure. They can be damp, the humidity could be wrong with the natural gas if you don't have the right dryers attached to it. And if your natural gas is humid or damp, then you can actually rust out the natural gas tank or certain portions of the engine and fuel system controls in the engine, and thereby invalidate your Civic's warranty. But if you do take that risk, then refilling at home at California's high natural gas rates would cost somewhere around $1.50 per gasoline gallon equivalent, which is incredibly cheap. This looks like what you'd find in a normal Honda Civic. However, behind the cover, we have a little dust cap and we have this really funky portal here. Now, this is only one of 2 different kinds of filler nozzles that you can find in CNG stations. The other one looks sort of like a cylinder and has a little knob on it, and most importantly has 2 arrows. So this took me a while to figure out. I hate to admit it, actually, but the way you use that to fill up the car is you match the arrows, they're pointing together, you plug it into the car, and then you rotate it so that the arrows are both pointing towards the car. That was a light bulb moment for me. This one's actually a little bit easier. It has this retractable cover here. We just sort of pop the cover on, and we turn this knob on the front from vent to fill. So right now it's on vent. Turn that to fill, and you can see now it's actually connected to the car. So now, of course, we stick a credit card in the pump, just like you would a normal gas pump. However, there's something new. In California, because this is a compressed natural gas vehicle, if I haven't used this station before and don't have a secret code to enter here, so I'll touch in the box because I do have a code, if I can remember it. If you didn't have the code, you'd actually be forced to watch a video about how to fill up your CNG vehicle. So if you actually pay attention to the video, then you'd know what to do. So any moment here, now you'll begin to hear this thing filling. There we go. So we'll get in close so you can hear the sound of it. So as you can see, if we come in on this screen here a little bit, you'll see that our price here in California, the land of almost $5 a gallon gas, is only $2.16 per gasoline gallon equivalent. And that's an important term to remember when you're talking about CNG vehicles, since you aren't actually getting a gallon of fuel because CNG is delivered in gaseous form. It doesn't liquefy at atmospheric temperatures. So instead you're getting 3,600 PSI of natural gas in the tank, and they sort of calculate that out to a gasoline gallon equivalent, and that's how they bill you. If you have an older CNG vehicle, there's a 3,000 PSI side over here, as you can see, but that will result in lower range in your Honda natural gas. If you fill from the 3,600 PSI side of the fuel pump, the Civic Natural Gas will deliver between 200 and 300 miles per tank, which is about what you'd actually get out of a regular Civic. I mean, it's not that far off. You get about 8 gallons equivalent, and you still get about 40 miles per gallon on the highway if you treat the Civic gently. So now that our fueling is done, and as we can see on this gas pump, $11.27 is all it's cost me to fill up this car. We now have 300 miles worth of gas in the car. To undo this, all we do is switch this to vent, and then we unplug, dock the little connector back over here in the gas pump. Then we return our dust cap, close the door. That's taken about 4 minutes to fill up. Now, economy cars really aren't any good if they don't actually save you any money. And that's where the Civic Natural Gas turns into an interesting proposition, because it will actually save you money eventually. So here's how those numbers work out. The annual fuel costs of this car are expected to be about $1,000, and that's here in California, where CNG runs about $2.16 to $2.19 per gasoline gallon equivalent. And a Civic HF would cost you about $1,900, and that's for $4.20 gas. As again, we're here in Northern California where gas is expensive. So over a 10-year term, this car would actually be about $2,000 cheaper to operate than the Civic HF, and it would be about the same price to operate as the Civic Hybrid. But, and here is the big but, this car would actually save me on my commute 108 hours of commuting time a year. So that means I'd be able to stay home 4.5 days more every year because of the Carpool stickers. And so what's that worth to you? Over 10 years, that's 40 days that you'd get to stay home more than you would if you had a Civic Hybrid or a Civic HF. Now, of course, that's taking into account the fact that CNG stations are difficult to find. They're a little bit more out of the way, and I would have to fill up more often in this car than I would in a gasoline-powered Civic because the range is not quite as far, and you'd have to fill up these gas stations that are slightly out of the way to just the gas station around the corner.